today's episode of the Home Winemaking channel, we're going to talk about topping up with inert gas. So you've probably heard people say that maybe it's okay to have a carboy partially filled as long as you never open the thing, you never look inside it. And the reason they say that is because naturally during a fermentation your wine will give off CO2, and you'll end up with a blanket of CO2, which is an inert gas, to protect that wine from oxidation. Now maybe that is true and maybe that somewhat does work, but it's a lot nicer to have some control and be able to actually check on your wine if you really want to make a good wine at home. So in this case, I've got a wine that's not quite full all the way to the top, and I want to be able to check on it, take some samples, and monitor this thing without introducing all this oxygen every time I open it. And what traditionally people would do, and a lot of people do, and sometimes I do, is you would just take another wine. This is a Cab Franc. You would take some other Cab Franc that you think is pretty similar to this, and you would fill it, pour it in here until this gets all the way up to the neck. And then you're not quite as nervous about oxidation every time you open this. You still don't want to open it too much. But it's not necessarily the easiest, most convenient thing to do. So what people do, and what most wineries will do, is they'll use an inert gas to top up with gas instead of liquid. So there's three options. There's CO2, there's nitrogen, and there's argon. So all these would be readily available at any place that sells like welding supplies. Sometimes places that sell brewing supplies will have CO2 on hand and nitrogen. There's pros and cons to each one of those. So nitrogen is the cheapest when you're buying in big volumes, but when you're buying on scales that we're buying at as home winemakers, there's really not that much difference in price between argon, nitrogen, and CO2. So because the price isn't that different on small scales, I prefer argon. And the reason I prefer argon is because it's quite a bit heavier than nitrogen, so it makes a really nice blanket. And it's also not soluble with your wine like CO2, because CO2 can kind of carbonate your wine a little bit if you're not careful. So I've got my argon tank. This is a 40 cubic foot tank. It's a pretty good size for the home winemaker. And if you wanted to do some welding on aluminum, you might use your tank for that too. So I've got a tank. I've got a regulator. This here is an argon regulator. It's got a pressure gauge and it's got a flow meter. And then what I've done is I've just connected a small length of hose to it. So what I'll do is I'm going to open this wine, which would normally be something I'd be a little nervous about doing with this much headspace. So we'll open it up. And maybe we'll give it a little smell, see what's going on in there. Everything still seems like it's fine, and really just doing this just to show you guys. What we're going to do is we're going to top this up. So I would estimate maybe there's 1 liter of headspace here. So the rule of thumb with argon is to put about 2 to 3 times the volume that you have, because you're not going to be 100% effective in transferring this without blowing some of it out. So I'll set my flow rate really, really low here. I set it at about 2 liters per minute, because if it's too fast, it'll just blow right out. And at 2 liters per minute, that means in 1 minute, we'll have 2 liters of headspace in here. Or 2 liters of argon that has, come out of this tank and into here. So we'll let that go for a minute, minute and a half. And I'll do this. In theory, because this is sealed off, this argon should be good as long as I don't open it again. But in reality, if your basement or wherever you do your winemaking isn't perfectly temperature controlled, this little bubbler, it could suck a bubble inwards as this thing expands and contracts. and it could suck a little bit of air into here, and you really, really hate to ruin a wine that you spent all this time on because of oxidation. So that's really all there is to it with inert gas. If you're getting pretty serious about winemaking, I would highly, highly recommend getting a tank. If you also do brewing, maybe for you the CO2 option will be the better option. But if you're just doing winemaking, I really like Argon. So look into it if you want to start making better wines. Thanks for watching.